Welcome to all of you who have joined us again on our Water Wednesday discussions, where I hope you are finding some use to these engagements, at least in terms of the information that's being shared. And so, as we discussed the last time, the intention of these engagements ultimately is to put all of you in a better position to know exactly what the city is doing in terms of securing our water future. A significant amount of money is going into a lot of different water and sanitation infrastructure programs, as is evident from our budget, not only in this financial year, but preceding and budgets to come as well. And so part of making sure residents and yourselves as councillors who are joining us today, part of our responsibility as water and sanitation is to make sure that you know exactly where all of that is going to. And so in keeping with our current theme here at our Water Wednesday webinars, we're still talking about our new water program. And so in the last engagement, we discussed our projects linked specifically to groundwater. Today we will speak about desalination. And desalination is not new to the city of Cape Town. Many of you will recall that there were temporary plants during the drought period. And so what we're sharing with you today is the city's efforts to work towards our first permanent desalination plant. So we've got Jan Malherbe online with us today, who is going to take us through the presentation that he's prepared for us this evening. And then after the presentation at about 6:30 or so, we will take your questions. But please do feel free to post your questions in the IM. We have some officials with us who will be able to respond to some of those. And if it is that you want to ask your question through by unmuting yourself, please just raise your hand or put your name into the comment section, and then we will take you. So without any further ado, let me hand straight over to Jan, who will introduce himself again. And Jan, you can take it from there.
Thank you, Councillor. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for dialing in. It's nice to see that we've got good attendance and good interest on the city's desalination project. I'm Jan Malherbe. I'm the project manager for the Desalination Location 1 project, also known as the Paarden Eiland Desalination Plant. Nicholas Tradoux is also on the call today with us. He's the engineering manager, and he's also been part of a long journey for desalination, for the city's desalination road that we have been on. I'll jump into it today. I first want to start off a little bit about the background of desalination within the city. The original studies in the early 2000s, we investigated various options. I'll map them out a little bit later. And in essence, we were focusing on the 4 areas that you see on the screen here to identify the best site for desalination within our coastlines. The studies, you can see various dots here that investigated different options on environmental matters and on availability of bulk services and water quality and the cost of construction. And in essence, out of that investigations, 2 sites were identified as most suitable for desalination in the city's context. And Paarden Eiland, which we will discuss today, was then selected as the first location. So for those of you that's well versed in the water strategy, that is the project that was then brought into the committed program as part of the water strategy. We have the Desalination Location 2 as well, which is a later period in time that it'll come online depending on actual city growth rates. That's part of the adaptable program. And over there, we're looking in the Witsunds area together with some alternative options that we're investigating. So specifically for the Witsunds project, the history here is started really getting traction in 2002, when there were studies undertaken on the high-level feasibility of desalination for the municipality's context. And then in around 2018, with the drought, things accelerated quite significantly. Additional sites were investigated. We looked at all our options. And then 3 sites came out of that process as the most viable and cost-effective sites to consider going forward. The Witsands and Paarden Eiland, which I discussed earlier, and at that stage, Paarden was a site that was also looked at and looked quite promising at the beginning. That site was parked for a longer-term intervention, mostly due to high and major environmental risk items, and we went further with Paarden Eiland and Witsands. The project that I'll go into detail today, the history we started on looking at technical options. We had, excuse me, 5 major options with some sub-iterations. And then what you see here is the procurement methods that we're considering. You would have seen in the last, it started in February, and again in August, we had a lot of public participations around the Section 78 process, which deals with the procurement models for a project. And we're investigating a public-private partnership model. And the 2 options that was further developed in terms of procurement was then the PPP versus the PSC, what's called the public sector comparator, the base case for if the city were to implement it in our traditional models. After that, we've developed the technical options a little bit further, and we are now at a point where we have a little bit of variation on the marine outfalls while we're wrapping up our feasibility studies. And then we will, in essence, know the best typology for the entire infrastructure. So if I now look at it and what the main purpose is for the project. So we're looking to develop a 50 to 17 MLD, megaliters per day capacity scheme to produce drinking water from seawater reverse osmosis. And in the Paarden Eiland area, you can see here at the bottom, this is the N1 that's running from left to right, and the R27. And right there on the corner, that is the proposed site that came out of all the studies as the most feasible. We have the pipelines. Where's my cursor? We've got the pipelines then traversing under the infrastructure and buildings into the port boundary, and then a pump station location close to the coastline with the marine infrastructure. And here you see the 6A and 6B outfall options. Some history there. We're busy with a 12-month water quality monitoring campaign where we've got approximately 700 contaminants that we're testing on an ongoing basis to make sure we cover all 4 seasons, so we can optimize our process designs, and also then some hydrodynamic modeling that models the river's influence together with these contaminants to then effectively get the most optimum location for both the intake and the outfall within this corridor. Some interesting notes on the project. What you see here on the left-hand side is TNPA's future port expansion plans. So we need to obviously steer clear of that. And here in the top area, this is the TNPA anchorage area. So we're threading a needle through we're threading a needle here. And it seems that all the preliminary results are quite positive, and we'll unpack that again a little bit later in the presentation. Then if we zoom into the site specifically, you can see the boundaries and the locations, and we're hoping to take access here from the Nareda Road area. The subsurface canals, these canals that's in here was constructed for the old Eskom power station in the building. So it also gives us quite an economic route to get to the ocean with our conveyancing pipelines. And along the road here, in a later slide, you'll also see the main water supply line. So the main advantage of this site, one of the main advantages of this site is the fact that we have very strong bulk infrastructure in the area that we can leverage previous investments and get that benefit on the bottom line of the cost per cubic meter of megaliter per day in monetary terms. And then also we have a industrial area, so the environmental impacts are quite limited. It's a fully developed area. There's no endangered species, as well as the marine biodiversity is also in an area with high anthropological impacts. if we look at what desalination is, it's a process that we take seawater and we pump it at a high pressure through permeable membranes. And we, in essence, at the other end of the membrane, get clean drinking water and a brine outflow stream that's then discharged back into the ocean. And all this is happening within the city's water standards. And we have sands in there. And if you go to the next slide, you can see the process train. The process train is also developed to allow for future enhancements in the sands regulations as part of our public participation processes. There was quite a lot of concern that we hear in the media around chemicals of emerging concern, etc. It is actively being pursued and mitigated on the project. We have, after our original public participation in February, the decision has been made to include UV advanced oxidation as a post-treatment step. And if I maybe run it from start, but just a quick overview of what is actually happening with the treated water. So the seawater comes in through the abstraction pipelines. We'll extract approximately 160 megaliters per day of seawater to be treated. That then goes through a dissolved air filtration system as well as a rapid gravity sand filtration system. So we've got a double filter system happening at the first step as we pull the water out of the ocean. It then flows through cartridge filters, which is basically getting the water clean to all solid particles, and then the reverse osmosis comes into play, which is the main filter system to actually get rid of the salts. After that process, we have the UV advanced oxidation and remineralisation, because reverse osmosis takes out too much chemicals in the water, and it's actually not safe to constantly drink it because the water is too clean and it'll remove calcium from your body and other elements. It goes through a remineralisation process and then again a disinfection process before entering the standard reticulation system. On the outfall side, there's energy recovery systems to try and make the plant as efficient with power as it can be. And then the water goes into a brine tank, and then it's discharged to the ocean, the concentrated seawater. Here's the image on the existing services. So the bulk water line, main line feeding the CBD, sitting right next to the N1. Obviously, the reticulating 70 megaliters per day requires quite a bit of infrastructure, and it needs to fit into the overall bulk network. So this makes a lot of sense here, and it supports the CBD and has the potential to feed back on the line as well. And the main bulk electricity supply also sitting here, strong infrastructure that we can leverage. In terms of project due diligence and additional considerations that we are bringing into the project. So for the city, it's important that the novelty of the project is not underestimated. We have done desalination projects prior. We have done temporary desalination plants during the drought, but this will be our first large-scale desalination project. In global terms, it's seen as a medium-scale 70 MLD, but for the city, this will be the biggest. The Witsands one will be the first large one on global standards. And then also the P procurement model, that's also novel. So we took a few steps to ensure that we have additional layers of oversight on the project, both in terms of delivery models and technology. We're following the Section 78 process, and this in essence is a process that's set out by the MSA to give us a decision from council on what the best implementation model is. This is outlined also in the municipal P guidelines that the project abides by. So we received our Section 78.1 council decision, I believe it was 2004, in the beginning of 2004, and then also the Section 78.2 decision. In essence, this decision is the approval to investigate external service delivery options, like a P or other applicable models. We then did a full feasibility study, and we're at the end of that now as we're sitting here today. We are awaiting National Treasury's views and recommendations. We received positive feedback from Provincial Treasury, National Department of Water and Sanitation, COCTA, and the Local Labour Forum. And if National Treasury comes in, we're hoping to submit our report to Council in the December Council meeting to get that Section 78.4 decision to allow us to start with the procurement process for the project. Regulatory approvals, also as we went through the public participation processes, as it should be, a lot of concerns around the impact of the project on its surroundings. So we've made the decision to undergo the full EIA process. The reason why I say decision is under the drought, we had the option to go for a Section 30A directive and fall under that, and then have reduced environmental processes on the project. After the drought broke, taking all things into consideration and the novelty of the project, we have decided to subject it to a full EIA process. This also includes heritage approval. So we've submitted that. We're hoping to get that process concluded as part of the EIA. And we're also subjecting ourselves under the Integrated Coastal Management Act to a full coastal water discharge permit process. And this will obviously be before construction that we need approval, but it also places monitoring requirements throughout the operation of the project. And then in terms of the National Water Act, we are also going for a general authorization, although technically it is with the project could have been motivated to potentially not go that route, but we've decided it's rather safe than sorry and include it. We've engaged with DWS, and that additional layer of control is also applied to the project. So in summary, what we're hoping to achieve in terms of our core objectives, we're hoping to supply the augmentation of the Greater Cape Town metropolitan area, ensuring we've got better water security for the future and economic growth and stability. Our feasibility study findings was published in August and circulated through for the month of August for public comments. And it was quite, it was really actually very positive to see the CBA benefits from this project in terms of the overall economic growth. And it just shows us that the cost of doing nothing will be much higher than any cost of infrastructure that's set in place. Part of that, even if that is true, we must obviously still make sure we get both value for money and affordability for the city. Those are two of the pillars of the Triple P. The climate resilience, also a key target for us. People frequently ask, but why do we pursue desalination? It is an expensive solution. Now, desalination is the only resource that's actually 100% disconnected from climate change. The other interventions that the city has is cheaper, but it does still have a matter of a connection with climate change. To use an example, if we look at a technology like reuse, which I believe is also one of the webinar Wednesday themes coming up, if we're really in a drought scenario, then if we have restrictions, sewage flows also drop down. So we also have reduced volume in our system to actually use with reuse technology. And in terms of groundwater, with long-term persistent droughts, we have drops in water tables, which also reduces the overall yield. The dams, all fed by rain, I think we all understand the climate connection there. And the ocean is the only true source that is truly disconnected from rainfall. So in terms of the new water strategy, we've got around an 11% of our total supply that's planned for coming from desalination. And that is then to create that highest level of certainty and to absorb that. And it needs to be seen in context with the total cost of supply of all the technologies together. The economic resilience benefits of the households and businesses. This is what I mentioned earlier. It just proves in terms of quantum that the cost of doing nothing is too high to consider. Councillor Badruddin, I don't think you've seen these yet, so I decided to give a sneak peek of the latest artistic renderings, just to give everybody a context for options of how this building can look within the cityscape. And we can see there Lions Head and Signal Hill in the back. We are driving on the N1 here into the city, and here we're exiting the city. You can just see the building fitting into its surroundings. There's a very high-level artistic prelim options, but for me, it was quite enticing to actually see the ideas sit there in reality. So I included a few frequently asked questions, and it's as we went through, I think we went this year through 3 or 4 public participation events, and we start seeing a repeat in questions. So I thought it's prudent to bring it in. And first and foremost, if anybody are interested in taking a bit more time to read about what desalination is and what the city's approach to it is, we do have a booklet on the website for it. I'm sure these presentations are circulated as well, and but it is on the city's website. And we also frequently get the question from the public of other cheaper water sources and have they been investigated. So the documented water strategy, the city is prioritizing the management interventions that reduce our demand with the water demand management. I'm not sure if that, I think that is still to come as part of the webinar Wednesday. We have the invasive vegetation clearing programs, and then the diversifying of our bulk water sources to include the groundwater, which was presented last week, desalinated seawater, as well as water reuse. So all these sources together is considered, and it's not a or of the one or the other. It is a multi-pronged approach. We have to do all of it. It is an and. People also ask about dam capacity. So there has been quite a few studies within the city, and the main driver for the water strategy is based on less reliable rainfall, as well as the reduction in the total rainfall that we can expect in future. So relying on surface water alone is no longer a long-term feasible strategy. Doesn't matter how much the capacity is in the dams, if we don't have the rainfall and the dams are empty, it would not help us. We also frequently mention to the public that the planning is underway for a scheme to augment the Western Cape water supply. So, and apart from that specific surface water scheme, all the most feasible dam sites around Cape Town have been developed. The few ones that do remain, they've got quite significant negative environmental and social impacts. So, in terms of the water strategy, increasing the assurance of supply if the rainfall drops is just not consistent and predictable. We have to consider alternative sources and invest in them way in advance to supplement the dam capacity. Question also, as it should be, is what will this plant cost? So the current estimates after feasibility stage is that we're looking at a construction cost estimate of approximately 5 billion at June 2023 base date. Impact on tariffs, also a very valid concern that frequently comes to the fore. So we've got to acknowledge, and if we look at World Bank papers, that the water is an international scarce resource. And with ever-increasing levels of scarcity, we can expect to pay more as a proportion of income for water, and not just us, the whole world, as we are stressing this resource. All our new supply schemes will have an impact on our tariffs, but they're a wise investment. And the water strategy states it beautifully, saying that it's our shared water future, and we have to keep the water flowing to avoid exorbitant restriction tariffs in a time of drought. Again, the cost of doing nothing can be far greater to the city and its economy. The isolated water tariff increases that's specific to the desalination project as a result of the feasibility modeling that was done is around 6% per year for a 2-year period. And then that will cover the cost for the project. The cost of doing nothing, again, far worse. And the CBA models clearly indicate that benefit ratios in all the PPP procurement scenarios are positive. This last bit, I've said it, but I think the actual numbers which we can share, if anybody wants to look at them is in the section 78.4 feasibility report that was circulated in August to the public, and it will now go to council for a final decision in December. A lot of people are concerned about water quality from Table Bay, and it's saying that if you bring that water in and that is your intake quality, can you actually treat that to a safe drinking level? So we have done a lot of studies on the water, and as we're sitting here, we're about midway with our 12-month water quality testing campaign with the list of parameters, which I spoke about earlier, to really understand how the seasonal variances with the intake water quality can affect the plant. This will inform our final design parameters of the plant to ensure safe potable water. Now, I must say for this modeling, our own expected outcome of this modeling is plant optimization. It is, can you guys still see my screen? Sorry, Councillor, I see my Teams has changed. Am I still clear?
We see you, we see the screen, yes.
Thank you. So the process design, we can, with confidence, we can treat the raw water from the ocean. The water quality testing campaigns that's underway is the preliminary results also support that, and we are looking at then further optimization of the plant and cost optimization. Will the water taste different? Yes, we expect it would, or we've actually tested it. We expect it will be perceived from the public. The taste will be picked up, and the reason is that desalination removes all salts and minerals from the water, and in essence, we then remineralize this. The calcium is added back through the remineralization process to stabilize the water. But just as with bottled water, different sources taste slightly different. Desalinated water will also taste slightly different. And some people that are more sensitive to the taste, they might experience it as a flatness in the taste, and it will then be circulated together with the existing water supply to reduce that impact. Then the question around, can we do this? And why are we considering the external mechanism, the PPP implementation model? All our indications are yes, that the city can do it. We've got the skills in the country, we've got the supply chain, and we have the access to international markets as well. The external mechanism is most favorable due to the agility that's needed within the supply chains for it, as well as the novelty of technology. And also then there's a lot of IP surrounding the different technologies that's been developed internationally. And for us to really leverage that knowledge, the external mechanism presents us with a fantastic opportunity to do this. The final decision will be tabled to council, and that will then decide whether it is an accepted delivery model, the external option. Then in terms of sources of pollution, again, together with the water quality, a recurring topic, and our studies is definitely there to substantiate our confidence. And also as part of this, the water safety planning will form part of the plan. We've included UV advanced oxidation to treat the water to advanced purification levels. And we are confident that all our current standings and future enhancements to our water standards can be complied with through this process train that's being planned. What is considered in us saying that? We're looking at the river discharges, the river discharge into the ocean from both Salt and Black River, and then the Milnerton Lagoon Deep River area. The stormwater flushing during storm events, that's also something that we've picked up in one or two questions from the public. And that is modeled, it's part of the hydrodynamic modeling to eventually determine the most optimal plant layout and process design. The marine outfalls are considered, as well as harbor contaminants. And then we've got a few more that relatively minor anthropological sources surrounding in the area as well. There is more detail around the process considerations in the section 120 report. as part of the public participation process. But when all is said and done, the final plant will and must be able to purify the water in the ocean, considering all these anthropological parameters at play. And we've received questions from the ability of the external model to still comply with the city's preferential procurement framework, and can that be abided by within the PPP scenarios? And the answer is it's a very conclusive yes. The municipal PPP guidelines that the project complies with, which comes from National Treasury's PPP unit, they set out the standards on top of the city's own frameworks that needs to be complied with. And the final bid document is also reviewed by National Treasury, Provincial Treasury, at 3 steps along the procurement process, which they call Treasury reviews and recommendations. All of this is done before we go to market to ensure alignment with national and local objectives. We also have the ability to include contract participation goals, similar to what we do in our standard procurement contracts. And then we receive the question of who will now drink the water. Sometimes we get these questions with excitement, sometimes with doubt, sometimes just pure interest. So the extent of the distribution of the desalinated water will vary, and it will depend on the season. So if the CBD utilization is exceptionally high, there will be a higher focus there due to the natural flow of the system. And in winter months, it will spread through a wider footprint for the desalination plant in Paarden Eiland specifically. But the water will be blended with the rest of the supply, and it can be distributed quite widely throughout the metro. More importantly, in terms of the water strategy, if we look at the bigger picture and the bulk water master planning principles, desalinated water as we go into the future will be a bulk source, and it'll just expand over time as more plants are developed and population grows. Eventually, we'll have the capability to reach over almost the entire footprint of the metro. And with that, Councillor, I believe my half an hour is up. So if there's any questions, feel free to ask.
Jan, thanks so much for taking us through the presentation. I think I share your excitement with those prelim designs. I think some of us will maybe want to see what that turns out as the designs become more detailed. But we do have some questions, and I see, just looking at the IM here, Councillor McFarlane has kicked us off with the questions that is asked. So essentially, Jan, if you can take us just into the time frame of this project. So you mentioned during your presentation that councillors who are in attendance here should expect a report to come around about the end of the year. Section 78.4 report to council. So that, I think, is the first next important step. And then where to from there in terms of this project? When should the city be able to see machinery on site, and when then will the city also be able to see this project completed? So if you can just take us through those 3 main ones and then any other important steps between. Thanks.
Sure. Yeah, you're 100% correct. Our first major milestone that we're targeting is the December council decision on section 78.4. In essence, that milestone confirms the feasibility study and accepts the feasibility study from council to say then with the recommendations is supported or not. If we assume a positive outcome of that and that the feasibility findings are supported and we go ahead on a PPP route, then the procurement process in a PPP context is quite long. So we're expecting to look in the early 2030s to deliver first water. So around 2031 in that time frame. So obviously the novelty of the procurement process, we keep that in mind. And then after the first water date, we've got a 20-year contract period. And that is in essence the PPP's operational period. And then taking us to the early 2050s, then the first cycle of the commercial deal of this plant is then done. The plant is handed back to the city, and we can either then choose to operate it ourselves or then to go out on a second operational contract through an external service provider.
Thanks, Jan. And then just to remind us that the total volume anticipated to be produced from this plant is, say, about 70
Correct,
megaliters.
yeah. 70 million liters per day, yeah.
70 million liters. Great. Councillor McFarlane, I think that covers your initial questions. If not, please do feel free to raise your hand and we're happy to take clarity. The next question we have, Jan, is from Councillor Haskin, and maybe Mike Kelly can also come in on this question. I see he's raised his hand, so maybe he's going to save you on this question. Where Councillor Haskin is asking specifically around the model impact on the rates account. A very important question. Mike, am I going to pull you in for this one?
Yes, thanks, and good evening, councillors. So the desalination plant won't affect the rates. It's a tariff funded, so it's going to affect the water and sanitation tariff. If you look at, even though the cost is about 5 billion rand, the bulk services or bulk water component of the water and sanitation tariff is only about 15%, and the wastewater component is 15%. Your reticulation of water and sanitation comprises 70% of the tariff. So that 5 billion cost is, because it only comprises, because it fits into the 14% category, it gets watered down in the tariff. So if one had to pay for the full cost of the desal plant in 1 year, it would increase the tariff by about 14%. That's if you did it in 1 year. But what we're looking at doing is smoothing it over a number of years. But I think one must also bear in mind that this is not the only project which we're implementing. We're also implementing the For a New Water scheme, which has been presented on previously, and that comes at a cost of about 3 billion. And we're doing Potsdam, and we're doing Macassar, and we're doing the Cape Flats Aquifer. So there are a number of schemes which are being implemented, and all of these schemes will ultimately have an impact on the tariff. So unfortunately, the cost of water is going to increase, but the alternative to that is, if we don't implement these schemes, then ultimately the city will have permanent low-level restrictions. And with low-level restrictions, it comes with a restriction tariff. And that's also going to increase the cost of water. So from my perspective, I think it's better to build it into the tariff now in order to offset future potential restrictions. I don't know if that addresses the question, Councillor.
Thanks, Mike. If Councillor Haskin has a follow-up, is more than welcome to come in. He must just raise his hand and then we'll take him. But I think that gives a good summary overview in terms of the response to his question. Again, an important one, because ultimately none of what we do here comes without an impact to residents, to each one of us. So it's important that as we get into this program, specifically desalination, that we understand ultimately the necessity, as Jan has made clear, but also the impact, which Councillor Haskin has taken into impact, other than obviously an additional new water source. I want to potentially still keep Mike in the conversation, but Jan, if you can answer as well, then do come in. Councillor Talib is asking around the funding of this project, and you've touched on the various options that have been considered. You've touched on the Triple P, public-private partnership, and also the other considerations. A question specifically is, have any conditional grants, loans, or public-private partnerships been considered as financing models for this project? So if you can then maybe take us back to the public participation processes that have concluded, which ultimately dealt then specifically with this question. Would you want to come in here?
Yeah, thanks. Mike, if you want to come in, feel free as well. In terms of the what we've done to date. So the project's core delivery model is in fact a public-private partnership. So that is the core proposal and recommendation from the feasibility study. And the Section 78 process that we went through is the process which guided us to arrive at this. In terms of conditional grants and loans, so the project's funding is making use of commercial financing. The feasibility assumptions has around a 75% debt to equity ratio, 75-25, and mostly funded by commercial lenders through the private sector, so not from the city's balance sheet. In essence, there's no such thing as a free lunch. So in the feasibility study, we do see that coming back in terms of the operational period payments that we have to make. It's called unitary charges in the PPP's context. And we also then see out of that PPP feasibility phase that it is in fact the cheapest way to deliver this expensive piece of kit. The machine that we're building carries the most cost, and the PPP model delivers it at the best value for money. And conditional grants are being considered and pursued according to the guidelines, for instance, on BFI funding possibilities. A PPP can only consider that as in terms of applications once you've passed the Section 78.4 decision point. So it is in our horizon. It's definitely not forgotten about. Mike, please add in.
Yeah, so I mean, BFI application is definitely on the cards. We're waiting for TVR1 approval from National Treasury. That's the first step. Once we've got that approval, then we can start applying for BFI. Just to answer the question about the National Department of Water and Sanitation,
Sorry.
Yeah.
Right. Sorry, just for those councillors and residents with us who don't know what BFI stands for, if you can just maybe pull that through, and then just a small explanation about that specifically, if you don't mind.
I'm actually not sure. I think it's bulk funding infrastructure grant. I mean, I just refer to it as BFI the whole time. That's what everybody refers to it as.
So essentially, it's a grant to fund infrastructure.
It's a grant to fund bulk infrastructure, yeah. And but unfortunately, the National Department of Water and Sanitation will not fund this. In terms of their pricing policy, they only fund socio-economic projects. And all metros, City of Cape Town included, projects like this have to be funded by the water users. So unfortunately, that's not something we can consider. We are looking at making contributions towards the capital cost of the project. So, the city will possibly inject some CapEx into the project if CapEx is available, and that will ultimately reduce the cost of the project itself. So we are looking at those options as well.
Thanks so much, Mike. Councillor Talib also then has other follow-up questions, and these ones deal specifically with water quality. And so she's asked regarding the various treatment processes, but Jan very early on already went into that. So Councillor Talib, you will get the slides and then you will see that. The question that I want to take you to, Mike and Jan, is the issue of how will the quality of this water be monitored? And if you can bring in the SANS compliance into that as well. Councillor Talib says, will there be a scientific services branch on site to test the water quality, or will there be water samples that go to our scientific services branch in Athlone? Can you maybe just give us some insight into how we're going to make sure that the water being produced meets that standard, and what is that standard, if you can share with us?
Thanks, Councillor. Yes, I think so. It's both. With a contractual framework allows the private partner or places the responsibility of the private partner to do their own testing and share the results with us. They also have to do independent laboratory testing through certified laboratories that's then tested with us. And we then have the ability and contractual right to go in and test samples at various points within the plants, everything from the intake through the different process steps right until the injection point. So it's a multi-pronged approach with multiple points of control, and also the water safety plan prior to injecting the first drop of water also needs to be approved by the city. So we not only see their laboratory testing regimes, we also see their process controlling as well as their management levels and escalation levels for in case any emergencies take place on the plant. So all the water safety plan together with the contractual requirements for them to self-regulate and self-monitor, and also the independent level together with the ability or the right of the city to then interject with additional testing will all form part of the contract.
Great, thanks, Jan. And then also just this idea of failing to plan to fail. Should there be poor compliance in terms of a sample taken at the plant? Let's say something goes wrong. What is your fail-safe measures to ensure that that water then isn't injected into the bulk supply? Obviously, the question and ultimately, how are you safeguarding the potable supply that residents will receive?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. I think the water safety plan that is a requirement for all our plants is also fully applied here. And that will put in all the control points, and in the worst case, depending on what you test, if your calcium levels are within SANS requirements, but perhaps we have a slightly stringent, as a city, a more stringent control. Then you have contractual penalties to apply. And in terms of safety, if any of the critical contaminants in the water at a mild risk or a high risk is determined, we have a flow out valve where we basically discharge all the product water into the stormwater and old cooling canals to discharge it. And depending on the severity of the risk, you have daily monitoring going on for all your higher risk items. And then as severity and risk drops, it drops down to a monthly or quarterly monitoring review as well, depending on the specific contaminant. And the safeguards are also tiered.
Great, thanks, Jan, for taking us through that. I think the last few questions from Councillor Talib. Let me just quickly scroll here. She's asking about the environmental impact assessments, which you've also touched on as well. Maybe just a quick reminder of what is being done. And I think she's potentially going to link it to that concern of intake water source quality. So if you can maybe just remind us of that EIA, what's the situation?
Yeah, so we are subjecting ourselves to a full EIA. We've now passed our scoping phase. It's been accepted by our scoping, they call it the scope of work, or studies, the scope of works and the scoping phase of the EIA. That's been approved by DEDP. We are now moving into the phase of the full specialist investigations. And that is then standing what I mentioned in the presentation. We had the option under the Section 38 to have reduced compliance because of the history of the drought and the water. And we opted not to do that. We said, give us the full level control and quality checks and the full level of investigations. And we did that public participation, I believe it was in July, where we engaged with the public on our scoping reports as well.
Thanks, Jan. And then last one from Councillor Talib. She's really keeping the conversation going here. But very important questions, I think. And we've seen some of these come up, in water reuse discussions and elsewhere. So it's important that we ask them anyway. The issue of brine, you touched on it, but what's the plan? And what is brine, for those who don't know?
So the brine is, in essence, as we take the seawater in through the intake pipelines, we remove fresh water out of the system, and then the concentrated seawater that remains is what we call the brine. Now, there's some treatment chemicals with that we have to declare and monitor in accordance with our coastal water discharge permit, and it's evaluated as part of the environmental approval processes again. And that brine is discharged into the ocean and dispersed throughout the length of the pipe. and in accordance with the hydrodynamic modeling that we've undergone to ensure that we stay within an acceptable risk profile for the environmental approvals.
Thanks, Jan. So I think that hopefully covers Councillor Talib's questions. Councillor Langehoven, I see your hand. I'm going to come to you in a second. Councillor Haskin is asking another interesting question. Yeah, I see he says he's covered with the initial response, but the plant as is planned at the moment, is the intention to be operational 365 days a year, 24/7, or is it set to produce minimum amounts of water and then obviously scaling up at times when it is needed? What is the operational expectation in terms of volume from this plant?
So our operational expectations is a 95% availability and production of the plant. So if we're talking 70 megaliter capacity, it's an average over a year. If you measure it, all the delivery over a year and divide it by 365, you need to reach at least 63 MLD per day. And that is the main financial model. That's also the point where we optimize our impact on the cost for the city.
Thanks, and I see Mike's hands up. Mike, do you want to top up?
Yeah, so I mean, ultimately, as the water demand grows, the plant will ultimately form part of the base load for the city. But I think initially, one must bear in mind that in winter, when the dams are spilling, and we have the ability to use surface water, and the demand is not necessarily high, then we're going to cut back on the expensive desalinated water and lower the production maybe from 70 megaliters per day to 20 megaliters per day. Because, we don't want to unnecessarily increase costs if the dams are spilling and we have a cheaper source of surface water. So, it's got to be operated within the context of all of the dams. But as the demand grows, it will ultimately fulfill the base need for the city.
Great, thank you very much, Mike. Thanks, Jan, for that. I'm going to take Councillor Langenhoven's hand, and then we'll come to Michael Eastman's question in the IM. Emil?
Thank you, Councillor Badruddin. Something was mentioned earlier on with regards to whether if there was any kind of danger impurities in the water, what would the procedure be? But there was a word that was used, which was very interesting, the contractual agreement. Now, when we speak about contractual agreement, would that mean then that an external, not the city itself, but an external company would be running the desal plant on behalf of the city? So would there be a contract with an external provider? There was also something that Mike brought up just now, which was very interesting, but it slipped my mind. So sorry, I'll have to come back to that one. Thanks.
Not a problem. It's basically the end of the day, so you're forgiven. Jan, do you want to come in for that response?
Yes, sure. Thank you, Councillor Langenhoven. Yes, the cornerstone of the PPP delivery model, being the public-private partnership, is that the private partner operates the plant. While the city owns the plant, they have an operational period, and after that, it's back to the city to decide what the next cycle is then of operation within the asset life.
Thanks, Jan. I think Councillor Langenhoven remembers the second part now. Emil?
I did. I absolutely did. Thank you. So just what Mike was saying with regards to the, let me just try and put this carefully. And so if the water production on the desal side is reduced and our dams, let's say, for instance, are overflowing, we would then have to switch over to the dam water and reduce the supply on the desal side. And obviously, if the entire network is up and running, then we have to kind of moderate the production on all sides to rebalance. But then does that mean that costs would actually be varied in terms of the supply and where it comes from, And how would that actually be done if it is actually varied in that sense? So from more expensive water like diesel to cheaper water like dam water.
Great question, and really taking us into important considerations. And I see Mike's hand is up. So, Mike, I want to pull you back in, please.
Yeah, so we very close to reaching our allocation from the National Department of Water and Sanitation. So we would have to pay for that surface water in terms of the pricing policy, and they've got various components. They've got a return on assets. They've also got a consumptive charge. So some of it is volumetric based, some of it is actually a fixed charge. But for the diesel provider, whoever wins the contract, we're looking at structuring the payment fee in basically three different components. One component would be to repay the capital cost. The other component would be for the fixed variable cost, and the other component would be the variable cost. So if we don't, we would have to pay the fixed cost irrespective. The fixed variable cost, things like salaries, we would have to pay irrespective. But the variable costs, and that means chemicals, electricity, and I mean diesel is very heavy on electricity. So all of the consumable ones, we would pay in accordance with the volumes which we produce. So that would limit the cost if we cut production.
Thanks so much, Mike. Emil, does that cover you?
That actually just created another question in my mind, because now I'm thinking supply chain. In terms of the chemical requirement within diesel, is that something that can be sourced locally, or do we depend on international supply chain? And if there are any disruptions, how do we deal with that?
Jan, is that one for you?
Yeah, 100%. So in the triple P model, where you bring the private partner in, one of the key benefits is their innovation and their knowledge that they bring in terms of the technology, and then their agility in operations and procuring materials in. So there is definitely plants and supply chains available in our local South African context, but we're not prescribing that, and that's one of the benefits of allowing that flexibility through a triple P delivery model. And they will not be bound to our supply chain policies during their operational period. The key contractual deliverable during that operational period is we pay them per cubic meter of water, and then the rest of the risk is transferred to them in terms of operating a day-to-day and making sure the delivery is kept.
Thanks, Jan. Emil, I hope that covers you. I'm going to try and move on now to Michael Eastman's question, Jan, and that seems to be a technical question that you may have to come up here in. The percentage of brine, what percentage is brine to fresh water, i.e. what is the efficiency?
Yeah, so roughly we're talking about 40-60. In our case, we're planning to take in 160 million liters per day of seawater to deliver the 70 million liters per day of potable water, with that 90 million then being discharged back into the ocean.
Thanks, Jan. Michael, I hope that covers you. And then last one in the IM, and then one last one from me, and then we'll try and close. Paul is asking, what is the approach to the quality change pending the quantity of the desal water affecting the industry? Can I invite Paul to come in to maybe just ask the question? Paul, do you want to come in quickly?
Good evening, Councillor. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
And from my experience, I used to work at the treatment works down in Atlanta. So the borehole water was a great impact within the industrial area, looking at manufacturing of clothing and also coloring, all of those food industry. So if the change in the quality of the water changes, that affects also the quality of the product that they produce. So communication with those industries is probably important, because I was then communicating with companies with regards to that when we changed the balance of the bottled water to that of the full flavor Markbos input, which changes the actual total hardness, which is specific of the water quality. Because I suppose desalination also reduces that. Because I was part of the project, I think somewhere in 2002, when we had a pilot plant at the Silverstrom treatment works, which also tested the whole desalination from the sea in the Silverstrom strand into the system.
Thanks, Paul. Jan, is the question clear to you?
I think so. I can try to answer it.
It sounds to me, and I'm glad Paul came in, because it sounds to me that the question is relating specifically to the intake water, as I understand it. So what is the approach to the quality, to the quality change of the intake water impact on the quantity of the desal water? I don't know if you took it away in the same way.
Councillor, no, I said the output. So that which you put into the final product coming out. So when the water is desalinated, it will be softer. So if you mix that with normal water, the quality will then will be better for industry. But they also have their own. I don't know. Some of them have their own systems in place, so they affect also the quality of the product, if not communicated. Is the communication concept or platform created?
Got you. Thank you so much, Paul, for coming in and giving that clarity. Jan, I think that helps.
Yeah, very much. Thank you. I think one of the big advantages of the process train associated with desalination and reverse osmosis is a good stability in your output product, because you have good safety factors within your treatment process, and that helps you to as you said, to bring down the volatility and to, in essence, get a net average benefit in terms of quality. So it will always still be within the margins, and we currently have variance and volatility due to natural seasonal change, as well as changes in source water from all our bulk supply services, and we will stay within that margin. So at this point, we don't see a dramatic change that's going to be that we've taken into account for any constant public engagements at this point in time. We are going to be quite close to the averages that we're seeing on our system over an annual basis.
Thanks, Jan. Paul, I hope that covers you. Otherwise, you're welcome to post in the conversation again, and then we're happy to take you in, because interesting question. I've not heard this one being asked before. That's why I was keen to really try and understand it. So last question from me, Jan, before we say thank you to everyone and bye. In the media, as we were hosting these, or before I go on, Paul, you want to come in again quickly?
I just want to make an example so there's some clarity. Rotex used to be a company that does the dyeing for a lot of materials. They have their own softening plant also. So at the time, like it was mentioned by, I think my colleague said that in the winter time they will reduce the quantity of the desal and then run normal surface water, which the quality is different. What I meant is then, do we have a communication platform to communicate with those industry that will be affected? Because it might be long term, but there will be an effect, and even cost saving for them if we communicate with them in advance to say we've increased the softeners, so we added the XL, so your treatment works can be lesser.
Yeah.
Just my point.
Well, thanks. I'm not going to pull Jan in on that one, but I think the point is important and definitely something for the team to consider as we move into the project, and obviously pulling on from your experience that you've shared with us. So thank you for making the point. Jan, last question from me. During the various stages of the public participation, there were a number of media articles really trying to drive this idea that the city is going to privatize water, we're going to privatize this particular plant. And we kept very busy responding to media inquiries and engagements at the various public participation opportunities, and I think it became very robust a number of times on the various platforms. But can you tell us here, for all of the councillors who are attending and all of the external residents and other guests who are here with us, is the city privatizing water? Is the intention to privatize the desalination plant? It's a very easy answer. Can you maybe give us what that answer is?
Thanks, Councillor. No, that's a definitive no. I think Mike will come in as well, but one of the key benefits of the Triple P model is the retaining of ownership for the municipality. So that's for me the simple answer to the question. Mike, you're welcome to supplement me.
Yeah, I think that if one compares it to the energy sector, you get an independent power producer. Now there, the city would not own the infrastructure. So you also get what's called an independent water producer. And there, the city wouldn't own the infrastructure. But we've chosen not to go that route. So we've chosen to go for a public-private partnership as an option, where the city will ultimately retain ownership. And then upon completion of the contractual period, we can decide whether we want to operate it or whether we want to outsource the operation again. So yeah, we have steered clear from independent water producers. We want to retain the ownership.
Thanks, colleagues. I hope that response, very straightforward, is very clear, and that it helps you ultimately to provide this clarity when you participate in conversations in your community. And I said that was my last question, but as Mike was talking, I was reminded of the temporary plants. And one of the other questions we get, Jan, when we have these discussions is, while you had your plants back then, what happened to it? They must have failed for them to have been removed. So can you just quickly take us back to those plants that we had? Did they do the job that they were supposed to do? And anything else that you can add in?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, we got that question at almost every public participation, and those were temporary plants that was brought online during the droughts. They were decommissioned after 2 years according to their plan. We took a lot of valuable lessons learned out of those that we're incorporating here. The two plants specifically that I'm talking about now is the Monwabisi and Strandfontein plants. We learned a lot about process design, about where to build in safety factors, about where to build in redundancy in terms of treatment, what engineering requirements are really important, and which ones drive up cost without delivering value. So they have been decommissioned, but they're still providing value to this day.
Great. Thank you, Jan, for taking us a little bit back there, guys. We're 10 minutes after 7 o'clock. I know that in the councillors' diaries we booked each other until 7:30, but I think we've gotten the most important points from this discussion. I'm really grateful for the questions that came in the IM and also those that were asked, and especially to the new questions that were asked. So I hope that at the end of tonight's session, you take away that the city is moving towards its first permanent desalination plant, that there were a number of temporary plants. They did what they do and they gave us valuable information, and that this plant is being designed to produce a volume of 70 million liters of new water from new water sources, i.e. the sea in this instance, in line with our water strategy. Another question that Councillor Talib asked in the IM. And in order for this project to be a success, the team, as you've heard from Jan, are really investing themselves in making sure that the processes in terms of treatment are implemented as part of that process to do what they need to do, ultimately clean this intake water so that it is safe enough for us to drink as it makes its way through our potable system. And again, you'll get the presentation and you can remind yourself of what those process steps are. And in addition to that, councillors and all the residents and other stakeholders who are here, not only is the treatment process being designed in such a way that we can trust it, there will obviously be scientific processes to test the water, but also even before we get there, significant amount of environmental work is being undertaken to assess that intake quality, as Jan has also shared and has made very clearly. And so I hope that you leave tonight's session more confident that the engineers, the team that has responded and prepared the presentation here, know what they're doing and guided again by global best practice. I know Jan is constantly engaged in these engagements, but also at the beginning of this process, participation by a number of domestic and international experts as well, which we didn't really touch on in this engagement, but important nonetheless. So takeaways here, guys: temporary, a permanent desalination plant, 70 megaliters to be produced by this plant, and we anticipate that to come online by about 2031. And just then, as an overall reminder, that our commitment as a municipality to protect our water future is that by about 2031, 2032, we will be producing 300 million liters of new water from new water sources. And so today we've heard desalination's contribution to that overall program. Jan, Mike, thanks, Nicholas, and others. Thanks for being here this evening. Thanks for helping to respond to the questions, but also thanks to all the attendees who have joined us here this evening. I hope it's been informative, and please remember our next Water Wednesday webinar. You'll see the adverts go out on social media, or they'll land in your inboxes. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful evening further. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Chair.